This is a download from BFM 89.9, the business station.
Good afternoon and welcome to the show. I am Mira Sivasudi. We have Dr Anjhula Singh Bais, who is an international psychologist, in the studio with us today. We are going to be talking about the role of the father. When you're expecting a child, we often forget that the father is actually part of this pregnancy as well. New fathers are just as likely as mothers to face stress, anxiety, emotional turbulence, and even sometimes postpartum depression. So Dr Anjhula is here to actually shed some light on this topic. I'm sure, I'd really love for the fathers to actually get involved in this conversation. You're always bashed for not getting involved and, for being distant, and because of culture, you need to be stoic, and then, the list just goes on. But give us a call if you'd like. You have to share a personal experience as to how you have made a difference, or you are not the typical father, the Asian father that, you often hear about. The number to call us is 03-77109000. You can tweet BFM Radio or WhatsApp 018-789-8899. Welcome to the show, Anjhula. How are you today?
Very well, Mira.
You have a special interest in this. I mean, is there something you feel about very strongly?
I like topics in psychology that are not brought to light. And, the interesting thing is in research agendas and funding, you'll find a disproportionate amount goes towards mother and children, research and understanding that. Not enough on fathers. So any topic in psychology that's under researched is always a hot topic.
Yeah, and do you see men who come to you specifically for issues like this, or does it just surface during chats about other issues?
Not as of yet, not directly, but many clients, it's almost a secondary order thing. It eventually comes up because parenting, stress, the fear of inadequacy, am I doing enough? Am I doing the right thing? The whole advent of a newborn baby and what that means, sexually, romantically, mentally, emotionally, all these things come up, yeah.
Okay. And general perception of the father's role in the family based on your observation?
Well, honestly speaking, that depends if my clients are from Malaysia or Indian, a South Asian context, or if they're quote-unquote foreigner, from Canada, America, big difference. Mm-hmm. I see that the sort of expats or foreigners are more hands-on. They seem to derive more or a different type of joy. They're less reluctant to express their emotions. But the Asians are more concerned about financial planning, financial providing. And if they can't do that, that means they're a failure as a father, end of story.
Okay, and do you think this has everything to do with culture?
Much to do with culture. I don't think there's a single variable, a social, cultural mix with individual disposition. It's a dangerous thing in science to make overt generalizations, but you can see a pattern and a trend. So, yeah.
And when you talk about the perception of this role, has that evolved over time, though? Because we do see younger fathers who are, going against this stereotyping, as you may call it. But do you think that has evolved very much, or we still have a long way to go here in Asia?
We have a long way to go. Of course, it has evolved, but as you were asking that question, I was thinking not fast enough. And the reason for that is because let's think about our influences. If we are raised a certain way, our grandfathers, our fathers, maybe we see uncles, where are our role models, or where are the role models for men on what it means, how to define their masculinity, what it means to be a father? And quite honestly, the media and social cultural institutions are not doing, even the courts are not doing fathers a favor. In popular media, and men are depicted as bumbling fools. They're the butt of all jokes. If they can't be left home with the kids, they can't hold the fort down. Yep. It's bound to be a disaster. All of this is subliminal messaging. So how is that encouraging to men? Then they, imbibe that message that I am bad at this, or I'm not needed, or I'm not wanted. So we can't really blame them for saying, you don't want to be here. We don't make it a very welcoming space.
What about the the man from Canada or the UK from Europe or Australia, for an example. They're different, as you mentioned earlier. The approach to fatherhood is a bit different.
A bit.
What's happened there, and that's not happening here?
Well, you have the individualistic bent of mind and the collectivist. And in an Asian cultural context, it's very much wealth, providing, protection. I think with a new wave of feminism in America, especially, in the 70s, there was this whole cultural ethos of pull your weight. You can't just be an accessory parent. You must be hands-on. So that pressure has led to quite a lot of cultural change. I mean, there's arguments completely being debated about whether fathers should be in hospital rooms in delivery or not. And, that was a direct result after the post-70 feminist wave. So Asia hasn't quite caught up, but, we're beginning the conversation, such as this discussion.
Yes, we are. And, many men have been in that delivery room now.
Still debatable. It's interesting. It's quite split between experts on what one should do.
Really?
Yeah.
What's the debate against fathers being in the delivery room?
There are some that... There was a French doctor who conducted research where men in the delivery room, he said it correlated to a reduction in oxytocin in women, which delayed labor and made it more difficult. So his premise was get out of the delivery room, right? And then, there are authors that write, it's not so much about whether they should be in or not, but people should be guided and coached on what it means. A lot of times people are squeamish around blood.
Yes.
And, stories abound where the father, meaning well, has fainted.
Yeah.
Or seeing an epidural needle going into his wife, ready to throw up. And it actually can be traumatic. Men have described watching their wife having to be wheeled for an emergency cesarean and watching her, being cut open. They've had a hard time recovering from that. It is traumatic.
Yeah.
So I think I would reframe it as less whether you should be in the delivery room or not. I think that's personal choice, but both parties should be educated and coached because, it's not as simple as one would think. There's a lot that goes into that.
Absolutely. And, if you really think about it, the role of the father after delivery is, and, during pregnancy perhaps, is probably more significant compared to being in the delivery room. If you think about it, I mean, you're right. Getting in there, looking at all this, it's intimidating. It's overwhelming. It's scary. It's not a...
And the dangerous part about that is that people just assume that men should suck it up because a woman is doing the physical labor. And, nobody actually asks, what is your vicarious trauma with what you've seen? That must be very hard.
Yeah.
So we need to be compassionate to both. Both partners are probably scared, fearful. It's a really huge new beginning in a new chapter. And, at the best of times, we're unprepared for parenthood, right?
We are. And
marriage and a lot of things in life. So it's okay.
It goes on. And that, cuts across women and men, actually, not just the fathers. During the pregnancy, how much does the father actually get involved? I mean, we read about how you have a better socio-emotional attachment and it helps towards the child's development and so on and so forth. Is that really the case? And how much involvement are you talking about here?
Yeah, so that's fascinating research on that. The more involved a father can get and become, the better the outcomes. It's outstanding what the results have shown in fatherless households or detached fathers that are not emotionally vested, where again, it's the wife obviously or the mother does the physical labor, but in terms of financial labor, right? Even again, the courts view fathers, and that's actually reflected in how many mothers get custody, right? That fathers are just financial providers, and that's about it. But it's quite a myth, and I would really wish that lawmakers, policy makers would actually look into that, because it's actually one of our biggest social crises. Fatherless nations, and fatherless, not even necessarily physically absent, but not emotionally involved. And then you're just perpetuating generation after generation of detached men who are wondering what their role is, how to bond with their child. And the distance, it's intergenerational. So it keeps going.
So how do you get emotionally attached or start building that emotional attachment to your child? Where do you even start? And when does this process begin?
But, men have actually reported knowing at times that they've known that their wife is pregnant before she has even told him, because of hormonal changes. So when men and women are emotionally intimate, physically intimate, there are chemical signals exchanged between both of them that actually indicate that, there's a pregnancy. And you can use that 9 months. Obviously, again, the mother will be carrying the child physically, but you can use that 9 months to emotionally prepare. It does not need to be left up to the mother, and I think it can be a very dangerous stereotype. Mother knows best. A lot of research has debunked that men can be equally aggressive, but they're also made to nurture. And their way of interacting with children, whether it's reading stories, while the mother is pregnant to the child, all these things affect the development. The way fathers play with their children, getting involved in, thinking about names, doing up a nursery, getting supplies. There's all kinds of ways that you can help. And actually, because the mother is carrying the child, she obviously transmits as a conduit for, the hormones and chemicals. But the man and the woman chemically interact. So the relationship between the partners is very, very important, and subsequently affects the children. So one way to also bond with your children is make sure that mother and father bond is very solid.
Absolutely. We have a comment here via Twitter. The financial question is important regardless of East and West. Studies have shown that paid paternity leave is more likely to get fathers involved in childcare. Case in point is actually Finland. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. When we give opportunities, even besides paternity leave and, HR instructions, think about it. The visits and appointments with doctors are always scheduled during the workday, right? If you're going for, let's say, welfare benefits or children benefits in different countries, these offices are decorated with photographs of mothers and babies and flowers and done in pastel colors, and the magazines and waiting rooms are geared towards women. None of it's particularly welcoming for fathers. I'm a big proponent of paternity leave. Absolutely. And when I have male clients and we're discussing parenting issues, I always ask if their company has that, and if they're at a, sort of high-level CEO and things like that, if they can suggest it. It's very healthy. It's great bonding as a new family unit.
We are discussing the role of the father. You said something interesting just now, Dr. Anjhula. Fathers are made to nurture as well. What are your thoughts on that? Give me a call, 0377109000. You can tweet BFM Radio or WhatsApp 018-789-8899. Do you think fathers are made to nurture? On the Bigger Picture, BFM 89.9. Good afternoon and welcome to the show. It's Health and Living. I'm Mira Sivasodi. With me, Dr. Anjhula Singh Bais. She's an international psychologist. We are discussing the role of the father, given, a lot of us generalize and think that fathers don't carry their weight. The list just goes on. And we have Melissa on the line. Melissa, you have a question. Go ahead.
Hi, yes. Hi, guys. So I have a 3-month-old baby boy, and my husband has been absolutely brilliant with him. He, he gets up at night to feed him, to change his diapers and things. But to me, he thinks that it's, he's pulling his weight, he's doing 50-50, but to me, it doesn't really feel like it, because I feel like I go through a lot of emotional stress with breastfeeding and everything. So how do I tell him that I don't really feel like he's pulling his weight? without actually offending him, because he has actually been great. But how do I make...
Just hold on, Melissa. Would you have more questions, Dr. Anjhula, for Melissa, or you just want to answer that on air?
Oh, I'm happy to answer that, Melissa.
Okay. Thank you very much, Melissa. Thank you for that. Bye-bye.
First of all, it shows sensitivity from Melissa's part, instead of just saying it as it is and framing it in a negative or a lack. It's a good sign that we're thinking about what's the best way to approach that. Because especially when you're a tired new parent, there's probably a tendency just to say it as it is, and that can do more damage than good. Sometimes we feel there is something missing or there's a lack, but I would encourage being very specific about what that is. So if you can make it concrete and sort of make a list of what are tangible things or steps that a person can take, whereas then you would feel more assisted in that somebody's pulling their weight. Another way of couching it is, instead of framing it in the negative and in a sense of lack, you could say something like, the baby really loves it when you do this, or the baby really responds well when that's being done. Whether it's changing diapers, like you said, various examples. And then the other thing is, you may want to question why he's not, so to speak, pulling his weight. It's very easy to assume right away that they just don't want to, or they don't know what they're doing. But maybe it's deeper than that. Again, a fear of inadequacy or feeling overwhelmed. Men also are able to suffer from postpartum depression. So there can be overwhelming anxiety. I don't know what I'm doing, irritability. I'm stuck. Will things get better? And all of this is compounded for both of you because there's sleep deprivation, right? So in a way to encourage that individuality and, people pulling their weight in their own way, maybe you can step outside of the house and say, and couch it in a way, I need a break. And he's left to his own devices. And to have that faith and trust that things will go well. And then I'm sure it'll even out, hopefully, more than what's happening right now.
Yeah, and as baby grows older, I suppose you just probably need to rough it out for the next couple of months. But when is enough, Anjhula? Melissa did say she's also going through emotional, she's trying to deal with her emotions. And we do know that postpartum, we all go through, we're a bag of hormones. So when is it enough?
Not all of us, but many of us. Some don't, and I don't want anyone to think that something's wrong if they're not going through it, but both men and women do. But in terms of your question, enough of what exactly?
Of giving, of helping. When is it enough?
For men or for women?
For the woman. When is it enough? When can you say, okay, my husband's doing enough?
Oh, well, that's going to be as variable as couples. Everybody's context and circumstances are very, very different, right? By necessity, you might have a parent that has to work overseas. Then what happens, right?
So I think the question is more expectations, right?
Expectations, but then also challenging cultural assumptions. Tons of research has shown that even if you have a double income family, women carry the household duties. So it's almost like they have two jobs, right? And then you have a baby. And a cultural assumption that might be very strong in this part of the world is now you have three jobs. You're a parent, you're a housekeeper, and your official day job. So obviously you don't want it to reach, the point of exhaustion or collapse. That's not good for anyone involved. Preventative steps, and everybody has their threshold and their equilibrium. And I would really encourage not waiting until after the baby is born, but having this conversation with your partner through pregnancy. How will things change? I think a lot of people, clearly you learn the ropes while you're at it, but there's a lot of conversations that can be had that will smooth this transition, where, it's not the case of I'm feeling really overwhelmed and no one's in my corner.
Yeah, I think it starts even before you get pregnant, actually. Cook dinner maybe one night or two nights. Help me clean up. It works. Oliver. Okay, we just lost Oliver. That's okay. Oliver, call us back, please. I know you have an interesting question for us. But, so coming back to the whole idea of the father. sometimes when mum gets very involved with the child and everything else that's happening at home and work, fathers sort of feel resentful because they're being excluded from the family dynamics. Because sometimes women have the tendency to sort of take over because we know best,
The perfectionist tendency.
Exactly. So then you have your partner who's starting to feel resentful for that. How do you manage that?
Well,
first of all, how do you recognize it? And then how do you manage it?
Well, when you're feeling really harried and frazzled and, on the tipping point, that's a pretty good indication that, you're speeding up to what can be an emotional breakdown because it's becoming too much. And I have a lot of clients who, if you're thinking in your head, this is not good enough subconsciously, I don't trust my husband to, get the temperature right, XYZ examples. It seems very legitimate in your head. And then when we're speaking in therapy, they can see the perfectionist tendencies. And there's a saying, done is better than perfect. When you can delegate, and provided that the father's responsive, but he's also not made to feel inadequate, incapable, the results are good. It works. But you have to relinquish that need for control and absolute perfectionism, right? And again, like I was saying to Melissa, practice makes, I don't want to say perfect, makes for, a better environment. So, it's conditioning the behavior. Go for a walk in the park, get a massage, self-care, leave child at home with dad, and trust that he's going to know what he's doing. Mm-hmm. And then everyone's forced to rise to the occasion.
Literally, yes. You don't really have a choice, yeah. So start doing that. We have Oliver on the line. Hi, Oliver. Go ahead.
Hi, yeah. So my daughter is 6 months old now.
Yes.
And, I love it a bit, but it's been very overwhelming. And it's like we have no social life anymore. Mm-hmm. There are some days I find myself staying late at work because I don't want to go back. And I know it sounds terrible, and I'm not sure what's going on.
Okay. Thank you very much, Oliver. Dr. Anjhula will address that on air. Thank you for calling.
Oliver, I really appreciate your honesty and vulnerability. Even posing this question can really help countless men in understanding what goes on in parenthood. And the good news is that this is very likely to be a temporary phase. Your child is 6 months old. That is a lot of upheaval. In fact, until a child is on solid foods and begins the process of weaning off, a lot of experts consider after the baby's born the 4th trimester. And what you're experiencing is very, very normal. It's anxiety driving. Do I know what I'm doing? The baby is crying. I'm not getting enough sleep. And the sleep deprivation really accentuates any other feeling that you might be having. And if your partner is having postpartum depression, it's very, very easy for men to chemically pick up those signals and experience it as well. What you can do is, if you have, a circle of friends that you trust, men friends that have become fathers already, you would most likely find that you are not alone in this. There can be guidance and wisdom from friends who have experienced and walked these steps before. Obviously, talking about it to your partner, sometimes we have a tendency to just try to be stoic and, I have this and I don't want to stress out my partner anymore. But then that can cause problems in the long term because we're actually suppressing what we're feeling. And more often than not, the mother is understanding because, the end goal is to strengthen the family unit. Another idea is obviously to speak to a therapist. If there is sustained depression, you can take medicine to help. But online resources are a very good idea as well. Chat groups, support forums, and you will feel much less alone. And please keep in mind that this will not last. And you'll soon be experiencing more of the joys of fatherhood and being a parent than, the uncertainty and the stress.
It is stressful, trust me. We have a lot of helpers here, domestic help. We have people helping us at home, and that can also sort of exclude the father in the whole running of the home and how we manage the newborn and stuff like that. Often domestic help is one. Secondly, we also bring in extended family to help with this process. Now, what are your thoughts on that? That sort of pushes father further and further away from getting involved. Some would be happy with that sort of situation because that means they don't have to be, involved. But in some cases, they probably feel even more excluded. How do we manage that?
Yeah, I mean, fair enough that some may be, again, there's no generalization. Some may be happy that they don't have to get involved, but I think the repercussions of that can be felt 10, 20 years down the line when I can't connect with my child and there's not the emotional bond that maybe I hope for, or I can't get through to them. I mean, and then there's that wonderment of where did that come from? Extended family, of course, it's quite a cultural context for this part of the world, and it can be a good thing, but like you were saying, it can also reinforce the idea that the male is not needed. And when we have a tendency to look at things from a sheerly pragmatic point of view, we sort of outsource labor, change the diapers, warm the milk, feed the bottle, and then all that's left is quote-unquote the positive stuff and the good stuff. That doesn't promote the bonding that most people are hoping for or think that they will have. And I wouldn't say it's only limited to fathers. In this part of the world, it's a really good point that you make, because labor, in a way, can be outsourced so inexpensively. The same also goes true for mothers. And then parents are sometimes in shock, and it's very distressing when, their child is sad or falls down and reaches out for the help or for the nanny. But that comes from prolonged bonding, touch, skin-to-skin contact. I mean, breastfeeding, for example, or holding a baby, that skin-to-skin contact, a lot of researchers, they don't even consider it as two separate people. It's so inseparable. It's this mother-child or father-child dyad, and it's a very, very sacred thing. Whether you're changing diapers or all the stuff that doesn't seem fun, it's worth it though.
It is. When you talk about the father, sometimes when, babies are born, they're, trying to work. They want to make the best of their youth and, climb up the ladder and they have aspirations, right? As far as career is concerned, they want to provide. They want to give their children a much better life, a good education, and fathers are working during that period of time. Is there a chance of catching up with this bonding much later on? Because I do know of some fathers who are now sitting back and saying, they seem to be more attached to my wife. They don't seem to connect with me. Is it ever too late, Anjhula?
It's never too late in the sense that, repairs can be made, connections and bonds can be made, but there is something that there are developmental milestones and developmental windows that once, like, for example, we have a developmental window for language acquisition. So past a certain age, doesn't matter. If you haven't learned the language, you could have an Ivy League trained professor linguist privately at your home trying to teach you language. You will not acquire it. So a lot of these things, the first 3 years of life are so important. Moments after birth are so important for bonding. And if you really think about it, let's say you have a 30-year-old child. The development from a 30-year-old to 40-year-old is pretty stable. But imagine how many things you've missed in the changes from birth to 18, right? So in a way, the grain is set in the wood. There's research that shows that children of two-parent households from lower social economic backgrounds, right? So not financially very well off, achieve and do much better than children from a single parent household with high social economic status. And I could define that or extrapolate that definition to not only mean officially divorced, but an absent
parent.
Yes, father in this case, right? Who's at work all the time. So whilst it's noble, and I do applaud the career trajectory we all have our ambitions and dreams, and they don't need to be given up completely because we have kids, but we need to strike a balance.
Fathers are also, in these days, and women as mothers as well, many travel for work. Some have been relocated, and then they come back every 3 weeks, or, they have that sort of arrangement. And they're, in a way, absent in the formative years. So how do you manage that? When you come back for that 1 week window that you have with, the family, what do you do? And I think what I'm getting to is the question of quality versus quantity of time. So we'll come back and discuss that. We're discussing the role of the father with Dr. Anjhula Singh Bais. She's an international psychologist. If you have a question for her, if you are struggling with something, don't have to give us your name. Give us a call. The number is 0377109000. You can tweet BFM Radio or WhatsApp 018-789-8899. Good afternoon and welcome to the show. I'm Mira Sivasodi. If you have just joined us in our Health and Living segment, Dr. Anjhula Singh Bais, an international psychologist, with us discussing the role of the father in, right from whether it's pregnancy till the time our children are actually grown up. We've gone through quite a bit, actually, the formative years, the importance of, both parents being involved fully in those formative years, as much as, you have to put food on the table and everything else. There is a way of striking that balance. You just need to, I think that what Dr. Anjhula is actually trying to say is you need to communicate this to your partner and work out some kind of a balance. Before we left for the break, we were talking about fathers who travel. Some of them relocated in some other part of the world, come back every month or every 2 months, that kind of thing. What happens in that circumstance, Dr. Anjhula? How do you come back and make up for the loss of that time? Especially during the formative years.
So I'm not sure you can, literally from a quantitative point of view, you can't make up for the loss of time, but you can make the best out of a situation and sort of mediate any prolonged or chronic effects that the absenteeism would have. And if you had to choose between quantity and quality, I'd recommend quality. A lot of times, fathers are unsure of themselves. They're very sensitive to the perception of, my child, for example, when they're very young, is not smiling at me or bonding, doesn't recognize me. And this is not only for jobs, right? If you are in the military, that's quite common. But, we're really lucky to live in an age of technology and creativity, and if harnessed correctly, it can be the next best thing. So when, you want your voice to be recognized, your face to be recognized, you can Skype, you can WhatsApp, you can FaceTime. And it's the consistency that children really respond to. So no matter how tired or which time zone you're in or, jet lag, if you can consistently wish a good morning or good night, that feeling of children are probably less picky than adults. It's just the fact that someone's there consistently is a really, really positive thing for those that have fathers or even mothers that are working abroad or for whatever reason unable to be there physically.
How would you describe quality of time? There's always this perception.
Very simply, it's not FaceTime per se. So if you and I, for example, go out to lunch and I'm physically next to you, but I am on my iPhone, that does not count. Simply put, quality time, the gift of being present, of being mindful in this moment, that's exactly what quality time is, and you can't fake it. So whether it's an adult, whether it's a child, they know. If your child wants to play tea party, you're like, sure, and you're watching CNN. That doesn't count. Just because you're in the same room, that's not quality. What you do is you get on your hands and knees, and you're like, oh, which tea are we having today? And you interact, and it's developmentally, it's great for children. You're there, you're guiding, you're an active participant. That's quality.
And now we have gadgets to sort of...
And again, it's, whether it's gadget, whether it's money, whether it's neutral, depends how you use it.
I remember Dr. Amar Singh, who's a pediatrician, who spoke to me about children who are not typically developing. And he says most often the mothers take on the burden of bringing these children who are not typically developing to the doctor for sessions, for, always looking for answers. I'm not going to generalize, but that seems to be the case. He would like more fathers to actually get involved. And he says, if you feel like crying, cry. But cry and start getting involved. What would you say to fathers who have children who are, not typically developing, and how they can actually sort of get over that, that feeling and start getting involved, whether your child is typically developing or not?
Well, a lot of times there's a sense, especially in men, of shame and inadequacy. And then on top of that, you add to the mix the cultural assumption of this is in the mother's sphere. She should be taking them to the doctor's appointments, therapist appointments, school PTA meetings. This is what she does. It's a demarcation of many decades ago that's still persistent. So, I put food on the table and this is what you do. I would encourage, I think if you have silence, then it becomes complicity, So if you have male friends at a party, it's very simple statements or questions that challenge the presumption that this is all on the woman, that you have to carry your weight. A lot of times I have mothers who come in with their children at the clinic, at the Mind faculty, and it's very interesting. I'll ask a question. So it's your job to bring the child every week, and you can see that actually the mother has never thought to question that. So it's actually both parties. Sometimes, we're just collectively unconscious. It's so deeply rooted that we assume mothers have to do it all. And the thing is, about the crying, I think that's very poignant and a very important piece of advice. Whether it's crying, whether it's the anxiety, whether it's the depression, there's that common stereotype that's not manly, right? Quote unquote, man up. But it actually has nothing to do with that. That couldn't be a bigger distortion. Actually, when you reach out for help, in whichever form, it can be a therapist, just talking to a friend, a wise elder, you're actually displaying courage and strength. And it's a declaration of hope that I am going to find a solution. And, you can center yourself in your masculine identity with fatherhood, not anymore at the periphery, but at the center, that it's very important that I get involved in my child's life and that I take responsibility. It's a core component of most men's identity, but that's been ignored for too long. And they need to give themselves permission to do that. And, honestly, once one man stands up, then another, which is why I salute Oliver's question. How many men are listening right now and saying, yeah, I identify with that?
I want to stay out. I don't want to go home. That's a sign, isn't it? That's a sign for you to actually think about.
But it's a good sign that he's aware and he can vocalize it. So good.
For fathers who are sole breadwinners from lower income families, it can be a challenge to, it's a luxury spending time with your child or your baby. How can HR policies play a role in situations like that?
I'm just laughing because I really believe in this. Paternity leave should be mandatory. And I would like to see all companies, corporations, institutions have time off without any repercussions, so you can accompany your partner to doctor's visits and things like that. And, one way to look at it is sort of a loss of productivity and income, but you have happier families, stronger units. That's better for society, better for culture, better for productivity. So somebody's not in the throes of postpartum depression or can get the help that they need for it, right? There's no shame. And I would trust that most people would utilize that break, paternity leave very effectively. And it has a trickle-down effect. It's all interconnected. So you have happier employees, happier families.
I'm laughing because some mothers I know are just send him off to work because it's much easier managing the household at that time.
Who says that?
Some mothers.
But then, simultaneously, Mira, they will be frazzled and at their wits' end. So you can't have it both ways.
Yeah. But when you stay at home, you need to contribute, lah.
What do you mean?
To help when baby is born. Help.
The father?
Yes, the father.
But the perfectionism, right? That also comes into play.
Sure, definitely. Point taken. Perfectionism and contribute. She's struggling a little. Your message, Anjhula, on the role of the parent, the father.
For so long, people have thought that, the father plays a periphery role. Quite often, they're treated just as sperm donors. And there's been a recent notion that men are actually not needed because you can actually create sperm in laboratories. Women are working, they're financially sound. And that has thrown identity and one's role as a father, as a protector, as a provider, as a male into question. But I'm here to say that the research unequivocally shows that children fare so well in uniquely complementary ways when they have both their mother and their father. So please, everybody from the community, social institutions, make it easier for parents, make it easier for fathers, and please join forces because we all benefit from it.
Thank you very much for joining us today. Dr. Anjhula Singh Bais, an international psychologist, on the role of the father on The Bigger Picture, BFM 89.9.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To find more great interviews, go to bfm.my or find us on iTunes. BFM 89.9, the business station.